But these ones, they need to be infused with science. We need to come up with information on to standardize, because from one location to another, the practice may vary and the efficacy also may change. So we need to do a lot of research here. Go to next slide. We also have farmers who use these natural enemies or these nature-based solutions that they invoke. They do practices that promote these natural enemies to come to their rescues. One of such practice is the use of the fish soup. There are farmers in Malawi, they boil the fish, and then they make a concoction out of it, which they spray on the crop. And these attract a magnitude of natural enemies, such as these ones. We are still identifying them, but all these are some of the groups that have been already reported as natural enemies of the fall armyworm, because the fall armyworm belongs to a genus, Spodoptera, that is available in Africa, and most of the natural enemies of those Spodopteras also are associating themselves with the fall armyworm. So we do a lot of work to disseminate, but it's not enough. So continue, we do cartoons. So all I'm trying to say that is in this process, we should not leave anybody out, common citizen as well as church people, mosque people, and the policymakers. But we should help them by giving them the right information. So go next. So in that sense now, what we are trying to do in our work is to try as much as possible to get the information, to collect information on the presence and absence, monitoring and surveillance, and use that information, use modeling and data science to come up with practical information where policymakers should make decisions. Because it's not about just raising the problems and talking about the solutions, but where and when the solution should be implemented. So go to the next slide. So we have come up with a map of fall armyworm in Africa and also in Kenya and many other countries, showing the seasonality of the pest. So this information can help government to prevent or to predict, or private sector who have these biosolutions to plan ahead of time when this information should be deployed. So we also give advice. I think this is what recommendation I want also to give in this talk, to give also practical advice on as to how this solution should be implemented to reduce chemical use. To also bring in private sector. Dr. Subi mentioned about the involvement of private sector and these people in the board of standards and pest product boards to come together to harmonize, because if a biopesticide is developed in Kenya, it's not easily accessible in Ethiopia or in a neighboring country. Likewise, when some solution come from those countries, it's not also easy to bring them inside the country. Next slide. So for push-pull, the technology I mentioned, we need to work around making the seeds available. We have managed to push the technology in many countries, but we need also a lot of work in terms of making the seeds available and explaining it. So in conclusion, I just want to say that these solutions, there are just few of them that we know to enable us to avoid the use of synthetic chemical pesticides. So they are environmentally friendly, they are affordable, and they are self-perpetuating in the environment. So policy actions are needed to scale up this initiative and to support farmers to produce safe products in the context of the right for good and clean food. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you for the presentation and insights on alternatives. Just one quick question from online viewers. The question is, since we are in the tropics, the insects and the pests thrive in this environment. Will the banning of the pesticides, the toxic pesticides, will be counterproductive given the environment where we live?
Counterproductive in the sense?
That we ban the pesticides and then we'll have an upsurge of the pests and the alternatives may not manage.
Okay, I think we should go on this in an approach where we don't come back to a situation where things are disrupted. So definitely highly hazardous pesticides, we need to start looking at which ones have to be removed out of the system immediately. And there is also, the pesticides also has responsible uses, because once you remove all of them, we have already spoiled the system. and some of those natural means are not there in good numbers to actually give you the control. They need to be conserved slowly. Yeah? So in that case, I would say that all the highly hazardous pesticides which are clearly not having a good for us or for the system has to go, but then we start looking at promoting agroecological interventions with time to make sure that all these natural means that are causing benefits to us can be conserved effectively so that we come to a situation where our dependence on pesticides becomes zero. That's my immediate take on it. The system is spoiled. So if you remove it completely, we don't know what can happen. So that needs to be studied also, yeah?
Thank you. For the interest of time, we appreciate your contributions. And because you will be engaged elsewhere, we are also happy that we were able to finish on time so that we may not inconvenience you in the rest of your agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2021, we had what we call the Kenya Pesticide Task Force, for which I was a member, and we prepared a dossier on the pesticide use in the country, their fate in soil, in food, and recommendations on actions to be taken on certain active ingredients. That particular document was is Dr. Paul Ngaruia, who is the head of research and planning at PCPB. And so welcome, the stage is yours.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Yeah, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I had shared my presentation. Can it be projected? So I work with the Pest Control Products Board, and this is a regulatory agency that regulates pesticides in Kenya. And as we wait for the slides to be put, PCPB has been in existence for many years, since 1985. And when the board was established, the name of the organization, as you can see, is Pest Control Products Board, to regulate pest control products, not to regulate pesticides, but to regulate pest control products. It means that even when the board was being established, there was recognition that apart from the conventional chemicals that have been mentioned very adversely in today's meeting, it was recognized that there are other types of products that are not, strictly speaking, the normal pesticides. Okay. Thank you. So recognizing that there are various types of products, that is why our organization is called Pest Control Products Board, to recognize that we have biopesticides over and above the conventional chemicals. So in my presentation, I'll give a brief introduction, and then I'll also give highlights on the petition number 70 of 2019, then action that we have taken. So PCPB was established way back in 1985, following the enactment of the Pest Control Products Act in 1982. So you can see we have been in operation for many years. And the main purpose of this organization is to regulate the importation, exportation, manufacture, distribution, sale, and use of pest control products in Kenya. We regulate quite a range of products. The first group is products that are used in crop production. We have herbicides, we have insecticides, we have also fungicides. And then we also have public health products. These are products for management of various public health pests, for instance, cockroaches, rodenticides, and then we also have products for management of mosquitoes. Previously, we used to manage even veterinary medicines, but there was an establishment of Veterinary Medicines Directorate in 2018, and since that time we transferred the responsibility of regulation of animal health products to Veterinary Medicines Directorate. So currently we operate using 6 subsidiary registrations. We have the licensing of premises regulation. We have the registration of products regulation. We have labeling, packaging, and advertising regulations. We have importation, exportation regulations, fees and other charges, and finally disposal. These 6 sets of regulations were done way back in 1984, and they have been going through various amendments because we have been having a few challenges, particularly on registration of products. In the recent past, as it was mentioned earlier by previous speakers, we have been having a number of pest attacks which were not previously there, and this has been threatening food security in this region. And what we noted is that most of the pests that have come of late, they cannot just be managed by just watching them. There is therefore need to have interventions if we are to ensure food security and also reduce yield losses. This really requires collaborative effort among various agencies, including root to food and people who are really championing biopesticides. If you could just go back to the previous slide. Yeah, maize rhizome necrosis, for instance, was one of the major pests that we witnessed some time back. And then we have fruit flies. We have the most recent, which is the desert locust. And then we have leaf miner, that is the tuta absoluta, and fall armyworm. Now, if you look at these pests, they have been threatening our own food security and our export market. And for instance, if you look at desert locust, we tried all means. When the desert locust invaded our region, we actually requested anybody who had any management option to give us a solution to the problem, which was very threatening. And the challenge that we are facing in this region is that being in the tropics, any pest or disease that finds its way in this region finds a very fertile ground to multiply, unlike in other countries. Now, in this region, we have very good temperatures, we have very good conditions that allow growth of crops, including very nice fruits. Equally, the conditions are also very good for proliferation of those pests. And these pests, as we are fighting for survival and talking about food security, they are also very smart. They are also identifying areas where they can survive. If you, for instance, if you look at the fruit fly, it is not by coincidence that a fruit fly is found on a mango. It actually lays eggs on a mango so that they can continue multiplying. If you look at, for instance, the leaf miner, it is not by coincidence that it burrows through the leaves of tomatoes. It is because it is looking for food for survival and is hiding so that even when you apply a product, you do not touch it. If you look at fall armyworm, where does it hide? In the funnel of maize. It's not by coincidence. It is mainly because it's also trying to hide the young ones so that they can continue proliferating. So management of these pests is not very easy. It's not just something that we can wish away. It's something that requires advanced technology and also use of multiple tools. Next slide. This, for instance, is mango weevil. It's a simple pest, but the way it survives, it lives inside a mango fruit. For obvious reasons, it knows that the mango fruit is very good, and for sure it will get enough nutrients inside there. Although it's only 1 or 2 in a mango, how many of us can eat a mango fruit when it has only 1 pest? Maybe none, which means, although it is only 1, we still require to manage the pests. Then look at the next one, the next photo. Just a minute, please, yeah. I took this photo somewhere in a farm here in Kenya. This is kales. I did not purposely put it there. I found it somewhere in a farm. If you look at the number of caterpillars on 1 leaf
of kales, there are very many. How many of us can afford to eat these kales with this number of caterpillars? So without management, it is almost impossible to produce enough food for our people. Next slide. So although we are talking about pesticides, it is recognized all over the world that there is need to regulate pesticides. And the reason is that they are known to be toxic. They are actually designed to be toxic to a living organism, because the previous pests that I've shown, you can see they are active. Even if you talk about a bacterium, it requires a product that can kill so as to reduce the population of those pests. So they are naturally supposed to be somehow toxic to a living organism, and that is why world over, regulatory agencies have been formed so as to evaluate the pesticides. So there are various types of hazards. We can have maybe hazard to human, it can be having physical hazards, can be having environmental hazards. And because there are also chances of the products not being effective, it's also good to check on the efficiency of those products. And the world over, people conduct risk assessment so that as you use the products to manage the pest, then you also look at the management and also come up with mitigation measures. So here in Kenya, we are not the only ones who do evaluation. Before products are allowed for use, they go through evaluation where products have to be tested on test animals. We have the guinea pigs, we have rats, we have rabbits, and also the big old dogs. And for instance, the guinea pigs are used for skin sensitization studies. Rats are used for acute oral and acute dermal studies. Rabbits are used for eye irritation. And then we have the dogs that are used mainly for the short-term dietary intake studies. So these animals are actually sacrificed so that people can understand how the pesticide works if it happens to be in touch with a human being. Then, after the studies are conducted, there are endpoints. For instance, we have the LD50 values that are generated. We have the no observed effect levels that are also generated. Let's assume, for instance, that when you do a study on a dog, you find maybe the no observed effect level is 2 milligrams per kilogram body weight. In order to ensure it's safe to human, that is reduced by a factor of 100, which means for the acceptable daily intake for such a product, then the acceptable daily intake is reduced to 0.02. So at 2 milligrams, no effect on a dog. Now for safety to human, in order to take care of the species differences, and of course differences in the consumers, there could be young children, there could be adults, then you have a safety factor of 100. And therefore, the acceptable daily intake is much lower than even what is observed in the test animal. Next. So pesticides can also have some negative effects on non-targets. And again, there are also data that are submitted by the agrochemical companies in order to look at the effects of the non-targets. And internationally, we also have guidelines provided by FAO and WHO to guide on the registration and also sale of products in the market. So it is only if a product is found to be effective and have no unacceptable risk to human or the environment that is allowed for sale. So coming up now back to the petition, we had a petition number 70 of 2019 that was filed in Parliament. And in this petition, it proposed the withdrawal of harmful pesticides in the Kenyan market. So when it ran in Parliament, it was presented to the Departmental Committee on Health, and they went through processes where the petitioner submitted details, and then ourselves, PCPB, we also submitted technical details, and we had also the agrochemical industry submitting some details of how they felt about the withdrawal of products. So after evaluating all the submissions, the Departmental Committee on Health came up with 17 recommendations. And broadly speaking, they rotated around legal review of Pest Control Product Act and regulations. The second recommendation broadly talked about review of products in the Kenyan market. Then it also talked about urgently enhancing funding of the regulatory agencies. Then it talked about PCPB publishing the list of products that have been withdrawn, banned in Kenya. They also talked about speeding up the completion of a pesticide residue laboratory currently under construction at PCPB. They talked of the Ministry of Health should be conducting epidemiological studies in areas where pesticides are used. They also talked about enhancing and promoting training and awareness creation on use of pesticides. They also recommended that the Ministry of Education should develop and operationalize a curriculum and introduce the topic of pesticide use at all levels. They also emphasized on the need to collect data on pesticide use and also introduction of a concept on of spray, using spray service providers. So this was actually sent to various institutions that have a responsibility to address these recommendations. So as PCPB, what we did after receiving the recommendations, we recognized that there was need to have a pool of experts who look at the areas that have been recommended by the Department Committee on Health. And we sent letters to various local institutions requesting them to nominate experts to assist in the review of the products. And 6 institutions responded positively, and we were given a total of 12 experts. Namely, we had proposals, that is diuron, diacloprid, pymetrozine, and chlorothalonil. And we prepared a report for consideration by the board. But before that, we felt there is need to share the information with the public, that's the recommendations of that team of experts, so that the public can make comments. Then after that, it will be submitted to the Board of Management, where the final decision will be made. So in addressing the legal review, we have been conducting the review of the Pest Control Products Act and regulations with the support of AGRA, that is Alliance for Green Revolution Africa. And we also conducted 18 consultative meetings at the county level, where that 7 counties gave their input on both the bill and the regulations. We also conducted regulatory impact assessment on the regulations as required by law, and also sought concurrence on both the regulations and the bill with the national and the county government. Then we had a lot of stakeholder engagement thereafter, and we sent the documents to the Ministry of Agriculture for purposes of forwarding to the Attorney General, and we are waiting for the Parliament to settle down so that they can look at the review. So on this area, we request that we can get support both by the industry, policymakers, and other institutions. We'll be happy to have the bill and the regulations going through. Just a few highlights on what we did to address the recommendations from Parliament. The regulations provide for minimum qualifications of agrovets and also provides for registration of the dealers of those pesticides. It provides for adoption of globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals, unlike the current system where we are using the WHO classification. It also provides for licensing of spray service providers, which was also highlighted in the parliamentary recommendation. It provides for registration of qualified persons to handle pesticides in form of spray service providers. It also clearly provides the role of county government, particularly when they are conducting extension, and also to create awareness on issues to do with the pesticides and the management of pesticide empty containers. One other recommendation was on budgetary allocation. So to address this, we submitted a supplementary budget request to Parliament.